I'd like to show you the hidden gem of the Elegance collection from Grand Seiko. This is the SBGJ249. This is one that I have recently added to my rotation, so I might be a little bit more biased in the favor of this absolutely lovely and dynamic piece that comes in under 40 millimeters in diameter. And so in this video, I'm going to showcase the detail work. I'm going to talk about what I like about it, but I'm also going to talk about the negative elements. So I'm going to try to be objective here as we take a look at this hidden gem. I believe Grand Seiko, they excel in doing two different types of dials. They do a very subtle dial that's elegant and understated and absolutely brilliant. But then they also do some dials that are very dynamic and very eye-catching. They're very attention-seeking, I guess you could say. And this Shosho GMT falls into the latter category. Very dynamic, ever-changing depending on the light situation that you're in. And yes, it is different from the white birch from the Evolution 9 series. That is a watch that my father owns. I have reviewed it. I will drop in some macro video of that dial so you can compare and contrast with this Shosho. They're different in terms of the direction or orientation of the texture. They're similar in the fact that they're both very, they've got a lot of undulation. They're highly texturized, but the pattern is slightly different. And obviously the color is different. So with this Shosho, as you look at this, as you look at the face of the watch to gauge the time, you're meant to be reminded of if you're looking at a body of water, say a lake, and the sun is reflecting off of the undulating surface, the ripples of that fluid form. You get a little bit of reflection off of the water, and then you're also getting color play in terms of brightness with the level of light coming off of the surface to the deeper parts that have more blue. So this, I don't know, I think Grand Seiko really nailed it, don't you? With how dynamic it looks, I don't know, it really does remind me of that naturally occurring instance that I think is one of the more beautiful instances that you find occurring in nature, the reflection of sun off of a lake or a river too. You can get the same effect. Now, I believe it's aided by the fact that it's visible under a box sapphire crystal, and this crystal carries a very nice application of anti-reflective treatment on the underside only. So the top of this shaped crystal, you still do get some light play. You get a little bit of reflection, but for the most part, excellent clarity. And that's a complaint that I have with a lot of modern watches that I review. We don't have enough, or we don't have good enough anti-reflective treatment, but that's not the case here. On this Shosho GMT, I get a nice level of clarity to where I can notice the details of the dial to a very pleasing degree. Now let's talk about the details. We have a gold bar shaped faceted applied marker system with a double 12, a double 6, and a double 9. We don't have a double 3 for the fact that we have a date window. It's framed, and I think it's aided by the fact that beyond, you guys can see a silvered date wheel. It's a metallic date wheel. You don't quite have the contrast of a white painted date wheel or a date disc, but that subtlety is really attractive, and I like that. Notice everything related to the GMT complication. This is a true GMT, is done in blue. So your indexing subset of your faceted applied markers, that's all done in a navy printing, very dynamic and deep in terms of the depth. And then your GMT designation in the text bar above the 6 o'clock double applique, that's done in blue. And that ties in with your GMT hand, which is heat treated or thermally blued. And so in certain lights, it really kind of looks black. And then in other lights, it's very bright and blue. And all of that blue accenting really ties in nicely with the subtle blue of this dynamic undulating dial. It's such a pretty dial. You really don't get tired of looking at this. And again, it changes depending on the light situation that you're in. If you're outside in sunlight and it's very bright, you see more of the silver tones and you don't quite get as much shadow and contrast on this surface on the dial. And then in lower light, you notice the light play coming off of these faceted applied markers, and the Dauphine hands, they carry a beveled edge, a polished beveled edge. And notice your minute hand and your seconds hand carries the traditional bent tip that is common with vintage watches or watches that are inspired by famous vintage designs from decades ago. So a lot of subtlety, a lot of light play, a lot going on visually on this dial. But I'd like to say that it's not too much. I don't think this watch is cluttered. I don't think this is hard to read. It's surprisingly legible, and I think it's very balanced in how it's laid out. It's very attractive. And again, the dial, the detail work, the clarity, it's the star of the show here. Now, here are a couple negative elements. Let's touch on those. It's a tall watch. It comes in just over 14 millimeters in overall height, which sounds really thick. You know, it's thicker than my sub. It's a sport watch levels or dive watch levels of height. And considering the fact that this watch carries only 30 meters of water resistance and a push-pull crown, you would think Grand Seiko could get this a little bit thinner, but it's a tall watch, and that could be a deal breaker for a lot of you. Yes, it still fits under a cuff, and the reason why I can pull this off with a high level of satisfaction is the fact that most of the height is coming from that box crystal, so it feels thinner than it really is nominally. Now, the next negative element, and I think this is the biggest one, is the fact that this bracelet doesn't have a micro adjustment system. So we do have two different half links, and the bracelet is beautiful. We have a 5-link design. We have screw pin connectors. There's a little bit more flex and play when you compare it to, say, a Swiss luxury bracelet, but I like the look, and I always prefer a watch on a bracelet. I like the added light play, I like the added weight, and I like the way that the bracelet makes the watch feel a little bit more casual. But the downfall here, at least with this Grand Seiko, is you can't get that perfect fit, at least in my instance. I'm maddeningly right in between sizes to where I want to take out the half link because it's just a little bit too loose, but when I do, then it's uncomfortably tight, and I hate wrist claustrophobia. So I've been wearing it a little bit loose, and I look at two different options for me personally. Taking the bracelet off and wearing it on crocodile or something sounds nice, but I wouldn't bond with this long term if I did that. So what I could do is find a sport clasp from a different Grand Seiko model that would be compatible and make that change. Hopefully I can find one for the width of this bracelet. I think that's the easiest option to get some fine-tune adjustment. And then the only other thing is change my wrist, right? Lose a little bit more weight and be able to comfortably take out that half link and go down. I think that would be healthful, that'd be a good thing. And that is something that I'm personally working toward, but just be aware, you can't get that fine-tuned fit that a lot of us look for. And that can be a big deal when you're spending this price level on one watch. Again, retail price is $6,800. Now let me talk about the value present here. We'll talk about the movement, and then we'll wrap up the video with some final thoughts. But for $6,800, what we're getting here is a pleasantly sized watch, sub 40 millimeters in overall diameter, sub 47 in overall lug-to-lug dimension. We have a nice bracelet. We have the dynamic dial. And then we have an uncommon combination of movement elements. So the movement is a high beat, and there are very few brands that do a traditional high beat. One of them is Grand Seiko, and the other one is Zenith. And then the other thing that's uncommon is the fact that we have a true GMT complication. It's done by a few brands, but the most famous of the main brands are Rolex and Grand Seiko. So I love this combination with this dial, with the details, with the light play, with this case and bracelet. I like all of that, and I like the fact that this high beat is very beautiful to behold. We get a little bit of the rainbow effect in the finish work, in the details, depending again on the light that you're in. This will have 55 hours of power reserve, and it's regulated to an acceptable daily deviation rate of +5 to -3 seconds per day, so a little bit tighter than COSC standards. And then you think about the fact that this is a hand-assembled, hand-finished watch done in the Shinsu Watch Studio in Japan. Look at the retail price. You're getting a lot here. You really are getting quite a bit for this watch. Again, it's a hidden gem, in my opinion, in the Elegance collection. And now for my final thoughts. This watch is a little bit surprising for me personally because I'm drawn to sport pieces. And most of the watches in my rotation, they're dive watches, or they're chronographs, or they're dressy pieces that have sport watch history. And I'm drawn toward that. And this is more elegant and more refined and more beautiful, I think, than every other watch in my collection. And funnily enough, I'm enjoying it more than, say, wearing my Sky Dweller or Submariner or Panda, Panda chronograph from Tudor. And why it's surprising is I'm so casual. I do dress up about once a week, and I put on a tie and a sport coat and a pair of slacks. But for the most part, I'm in jeans and a t-shirt. And this watch feels at home casually too, which took me by surprise. And I really like that. So overall, so many strengths, a lot of value here. It is a gem. It is a beautiful watch that you don't get tired of looking at. It does have that perfect blend of uncommon elements as far as the movement is concerned. And then again, depending on the light that you're in, it's ever changing. It's so satisfying. Is it perfect? Definitely not. It's tall. It doesn't have much water resistance. We don't have the adjustability in the bracelet. So there are things to really consider if you're looking into this watch. But on the whole, I'm so glad I bought it. I love it. The honeymoon will continue. And please reach out with any questions you may have about this SBGJ249. I'd be happy to try to answer those. And if you guys are shopping for Grand Seiko, I'm going to place my recommended authorized dealer in the description, along with my sales guy's contact information. So thank you for watching. Have a great day. I'll see you guys next time.